I still remember the sound of that champagne glass clinking in his hand. The laughter, the silence that followed. One moment I was offering drinks with a tight smile, trying to keep the evening civil. The next I was flat on the floor, my heels twisted beneath me, surrounded by a sea of stunned faces. My husband, Marcus Whitmore, didn't just kick me. He did it in front of everyone, our neighbors, his colleagues, even the new assistant from his office, who had no business being at our housewarming party. He looked down at me with a smirk and said, "She talks too much." Now y'all see what I deal with every day. Some people laughed, not many, but enough. In that moment, something inside me snapped, not just from the physical pain, but from the weight of 4 years spent shrinking in silence. I had loved that man. I had helped him build his dream from nothing, used my own inheritance to fund his business. And what did I get? Gaslighting. Infidelity. Humiliation. But what Marcus didn't know, and what would soon become the greatest shock of his life, was that the empire he stood so proudly on was built on paper that bore my name. The house, the company, even the car he drove. That night I didn't just fall. I rose quietly, smartly, because if Marcus thought that kick was the end of the story, he had no idea what was coming next. I met Marcus in the most unsuspecting place, wedged between dusty shelves at a second-hand bookstore in Tallahassee, Florida. He was charming in a scruffy kind of way, with a smooth voice and just the right amount of confidence to catch my attention. I was managing my late aunt's small food delivery startup at the time. He was a blogger barely scraping by with a busted laptop and big dreams. Back then, I thought I'd found someone hungry, driven, and genuine. We dated for 6 months before he proposed with a hand-me-down ring and a speech that would have made any woman believe in destiny. My friends said he was ambitious. I called him focused. I had just received a life-changing inheritance, $85,000 from my late mother's estate, and without hesitation, I used it to co-found Marcus Digital Venture. His little tech blog grew slowly at first. Within 2 years, it was bringing in enough to get us a decent apartment, a new car, and a staff of 3. That's when the shift began. One day he told me we needed to divide roles. "You just focus on being my queen," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'll handle the business side." At the time, it felt sweet, regal even. I didn't realize he was quietly erasing me from the company I helped create. Suddenly, I wasn't involved in meetings, the financial decisions off limits. I was told to just trust him. Soon the apartment filled with things that didn't belong to me, perfume I didn't wear, lipstick stains. I didn't leave hair that clearly wasn't mine. Every time I confronted him, he flipped the script. "You're paranoid, insecure, crazy," and I believed it. For years, I folded myself smaller and smaller to fit into the shrinking space he gave me. I became the quiet wife at the edge of the party, the woman who smiled through clenched teeth while other women roamed freely through my home like they owned the place. Then came the promotion party, the one where Marcus was celebrating a partnership with a national tech giant. He invited over 60 guests without telling me. I found out 2 days before. Still, I cooked, cleaned, dressed up, and served drinks. That night, while his friends laughed and toasted to his success, I overheard one of them say I was too old-fashioned. Marcus shrugged. "She's from a different world," he chuckled. "But she's learning her place." That was it. My last thread of tolerance snapped. I turned to leave, but when my heel caught on the rug, Marcus didn't help me. He pushed, and that push, that moment, was the beginning of his end. The music had barely skipped a beat after I hit the floor. People glanced, whispered, then resumed their conversations, as if nothing had happened. Marcus sipped his champagne like he'd won something. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and sat on the cold tile in silence. But inside a storm was forming. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out a worn-out file box from the back of my closet, old business registrations, bank statements, the deed to the house, and the power of attorney documents Marcus had carelessly signed years ago when we trusted each other. I checked the signatures. I read every clause. And then I smiled. The house we lived in, still in my name. The business he flaunted to investors, registered under the LLC. We co-founded using my inheritance. The car in the driveway, paid through my mother's trust account. He had spent the last 3 years building his throne on paper that belonged to me. The next morning he walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. He tossed his keys on the counter and barked. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I turned to him, slowly, met his eyes, and whispered, "I embarrassed you, Marcus. You haven't seen anything yet." He scoffed. "You can't do anything. You're just the wife." I straightened. "No, Marcus, I'm the owner." That was the moment his smirk faded. By lunchtime, I had frozen our joint accounts. The bank manager, an older gentleman had once helped set up an account for his daughter, processed the revocation of Marcus' signatory rights without hesitation. At 2:00 p.m., the electric company sent a notice for unpaid bills Marcus was supposed to pay through the business account. By 5:00 p.m., he was calling my phone non-stop. I didn't answer. Instead, I called a locksmith. By nightfall, the locks were changed. The security code reset. The remote gate reprogrammed. And Marcus. He came home just before midnight, half drunk, slurring insults through the gate, pounding on the steel like a man locked out of his own kingdom. But this time I wasn't the one shut out. I stood behind the curtain lights off, watching him with arms folded. Not with hatred, but with clarity. In that moment I realized I didn't just hold the keys to the house. I held every key he thought I'd lost. The queen he thought he'd buried. She was wide awake, and she had just begun her move. Marcus didn't sleep in our bed that night. He slept in his car parked, just outside the gate, still wearing the same navy blazer from the party, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. I watched him from the upstairs window, arms crossed, unmoved. He paced for hours, cursing under his breath, banging on the intercom like a madman. But the more he yelled, the more power I felt returning to me. By morning, he was gone. I put on a crisp white pantsuit, the same one I wore the day I registered our business 5 years ago, the day I first stepped into my own light. Then I drove to the bank. The manager greeted me with wide eyes. "Ma'am, we received your instructions to freeze the joint accounts." "Yes," I said, "and I need full withdrawal access moved to my name, effective today." He hesitated. I handed him a folder documents proving ownership, the incorporation certificate, my mother's trust authorization, the business contract with my signature as the primary investor. Everything was in order. 10 minutes later, he looked up and said, "It's done. You're now the sole signatory." I didn't smile. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. That afternoon, I drove to our office in downtown Atlanta. Marcus hadn't shown up, no surprise. Whispers filled the corridors. Some employees avoided my gaze. Others looked at me with cautious sympathy. One young intern leaned in and asked quietly, "Mom, are you okay?" We heard what he did. I paused, then said clearly, "He kicked me in front of you all. And now I'm kicking him out." Silently. She nodded. "We stand with you." By 3:00 p.m., I had issued new protocols. All decisions must go through me. Marcus company access cards were revoked. I appointed my cousin Serena as interim operations manager. At 6:00 p.m., Marcus received the email. "Effective immediately. Mr. Marcus Whitmore is suspended pending investigation into financial misconduct." He called me 17 times that evening. I didn't answer. The voicemails came next. "This is madness, Elise. You're ruining me. You froze my accounts, changed the locks. You think that makes you powerful? Then the one that made me laugh out loud, I made you. No, Marcus. I was the one who poured the foundation, planted the seeds, and gave it sunlight. He just stood in the shade too blind to realize the roots were mine all along. But I knew this wasn't over. He was about to get desperate. And desperate men always come crashing through the front door. Just as I predicted, Marcus didn't go quietly. The next evening, around 6:15 p.m., I saw flashing blue lights outside the gate. 2 police officers were standing beside Marcus, who was waving his arms wildly and shouting something about illegal eviction. I stayed upstairs watching from behind the curtain, calm but ready. When they rang the doorbell, I descended slowly, documents in hand, shoulders back, every step echoing like a drumbeat of justice. One of the officers spoke first. "Mom, this man claims he's the legal owner of this residence." I held out the deed. "This house is registered in my name, purchased through a trust account I inherited from my mother. Marcus Whitmore has no tenancy agreement, no ownership rights," and I rolled up my sleeve, revealing a faint bruise on my arm. "He assaulted me 2 nights ago in front of over 60 witnesses." The officers glanced at each other. One turned to Marcus and asked, "Is that true?" He sputtered, "She's lying, she's crazy, this is my house." The older officer sighed. "Sir, if the paperwork is in her name and you have no legal claim, you'll need to take this matter to court. This is a domestic issue, not a criminal one." And just like that, they left. Marcus stood frozen on the sidewalk, disbelief contorting his face. I didn't gloat, I didn't scream. I simply closed the gate and said, "You made 1,000 mistakes, Marcus, and I remember every single one." That night, my cousin Serena called from the office. "You need to see this," she whispered. It was a burner. Facebook account, clearly Marcus posting photos of me alongside captions like, "This woman stole my company, and she used black magic to ruin my life." He was unraveling in public, broadcasting his downfall, like a man too far gone to realize he was the one holding the match. But what Marcus didn't know was that I had more than bank statements and title deeds. I had witnesses, receipts, emails, screenshots, and now I had allies, women he had hurt before lining up with their own truths. One of them reached out to me the very next day. Her name was Zuri, and with quiet eyes and a folder of damning evidence in her purse, she said 7 words that changed everything. "I want to help you take him down." Zuri didn't flinch. She didn't beg or cry. She sat across from me at a quiet cafe, slid a folded sheet of WhatsApp messages across the table, and said plainly, "He told me you were crazy, that you faked pregnancies, that you forged love letters and made up childhood trauma." My fingers tightened around the cup of tea in my hand, but I stayed calm. I had heard it all before from Marcus himself. But Zuri wasn't there to defend him, far from it. She was the latest in a line of women Marcus had groomed with the same stories. I was unstable. The business was failing because of me. He was the victim. But now the truth was beginning to unravel, and Zuri had come to hand me the thread. She had voice memos, screenshots, even a recording of Marcus bragging to a friend about how easy it was to manipulate emotional women with money. She wasn't the only one. Another woman. Angela had already invested in Marcus' next fake venture, a supposed skincare brand he promised to build with her in South Africa. This wasn't just a broken marriage anymore. This was a pattern, a blueprint. I handed everything to Amaka, my lawyer, who looked up after reviewing the files and said, "We're not just talking restitution anymore. This is fraud." We filed an emergency injunction to freeze any new businesses opened in Marcus' name. He was served the court papers at the gym, his favorite place to flaunt sneakers bought with my money. His face, once the picture of confidence, turned to ash when he read the document. Online, the fallout was brutal. Blog posts, tweets, and gossip threads lit up. She built the business. He cheated and tried to take it all. Karma wears heels this year. Marcus tried to reclaim his image with a teary YouTube video, complete with sad piano music and blurry shots of him in a bare apartment, saying I had ruined him. But the comments didn't sympathize. They reminded him, "You kicked her in front of everyone. You started this." But I knew Marcus. That video wasn't the end. It was the warning shot. He wasn't done, and neither was I. It was a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a message that made my chest tighten, not out of fear, but fury. The sender, Sandra. The woman Marcus once introduced as just a co-worker. Her message was sharp and unsettling. "You think you've won? Wait till you find out what he told me about you." I didn't respond, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing question, what new poison had Marcus poured into someone else's ear? The next morning, my housekeeper, Emma, mentioned a red sedan parked across the street for over an hour. A woman, she said. Didn't get out. Just sat there watching. I didn't have to ask who. I knew it was her. Later that day, the doorbell rang. Not the gate, the front door. No one had access anymore. When I opened it, there she stood. Sandra. Impeccably dressed. Calm. Her red lipstick bold against her pale face. She wasn't smug. She looked haunted. "I'm not here to fight," she said, handing me a manila envelope. "Just read this. You'll understand." Then she turned and walked away. Inside the envelope were copies of letters I'd written. Marcus over the years, love notes, apologies, memories. Some were over a decade old. Alongside them were handwriting analyses, notes, reports. Sandra's handwritten message explained everything Marcus told her. I wrote those letters to myself. That I was mentally unstable. That I had faked pregnancies and invented trauma to gain his sympathy. He had spun a narrative so twisted that even I, reading it in Sandra's words, had to take a breath to steady myself. That night I didn't sleep. The pain wasn't physical. It was psychological sabotage. He hadn't just left scars. He had tried to rewrite my life, turning my love into obsession, my kindness into madness. But if Sandra came bearing truth, I needed more than memories. I needed proof. So I asked her to meet again. And this time would talk everything. Because Marcus had used women like matches, burning them for light, then discarding the ashes. But this time the fire was ours. And we were going to burn down his lies. Together. We met again the next day this time, on a quiet rooftop lounge downtown. Sandra arrived without her sharp makeup or towering heels. She looked human, worn, real. "He told me you beat him," she said quietly. "That he stayed with you out of pity. That you were the reason he couldn't be happy." I didn't laugh. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough now. He used to hide my phone so I couldn't call my family, I told her. He hit me so hard once I lost a tooth, then told people I slipped in the shower. Sandra's eyes watered. "He said I was his peace," she whispered. "That I healed him." I shook my head. "He doesn't heal. He harvests." We sat in silence for a moment before I leaned in and said what we both knew deep down. He never loved us. He loved control. By the end of our conversation, Sandra gave me everything she had: texts, voicemails, screenshots of him planning to scam yet another woman. I passed it all to Amaka, my lawyer, because this wasn't just about closure anymore. This was a case. And I wasn't just a woman who survived a kick. I was the one who kicked back with the law. Never underestimate the power of silence when paired with preparation. You don't have to shout to be heard, and you don't have to fight dirty to win. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is living free with your dignity intact and your truth documented. If this story spoke to your heart, drop a comment below. Tell us what you would have done. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories of strength, justice, and healing. Your voice matters. Let it rise.